Anxiety. People are uptight. My daughter made an interesting observation the other day. She was talking to me and she was describing how exhausted her family was. They had just come back from a little holiday together, and everybody was exhausted. And she posited that it's because normally we go through our days and we can afford to be on autopilot. We can just do what we're doing and it's highly efficient. The mind is just kind of glossing over the surfaces of things, and it's, oh yeah, the shopping, get the dinner ready, do this, do that, make my calls. But with the pandemic, you can't really be on autopilot. You have to be vigilant, and it's actually a kind of hypervigilance because it's serious illness. I saw on the news this morning about a 26-year-old girl who's being intubated for 6 weeks. You know, she got sick, young, healthy, perfect shape. So we just don't know. I caught myself the other day shaking hands with somebody I just met. And then I had to kind of carry my hand aloft until I could get back to my sanitizer. And then 30 minutes later, I realized I'd forgotten to sanitize my hand. And, that can engender anxiety. So I have to tell a story on myself because it doesn't matter how much zazen you sit or how enlightened you might be. If you're not in tune, if you're not paying attention, you're in trouble. So an old friend got in contact with me, somebody I hadn't seen in maybe 50 years. Someone since 1964 or 5, when I first came to San Francisco. We were in a theater company together, and she had moved to to Sebastopol, and I made arrangements to go over and see her. And so I put on my mask and I came in. She lives in a kind of small little magical trailer that's covered with shawls and blankets, and she's a tarot reader. And I came over in my mask, and she came running up to give me a hug. And I said, oh no, I'm just not sure how careful you're being. And she laughed and she said, oh, I'm not careful at all. Just take that damn mask off. And I had to say, no, I'm being careful. I'm almost 79 years old. I'm blood type A positive. If COVID gets me, it's likely to have a death warrant with it. So we sat outside, and I maneuvered myself upwind. And she's a very emotional person. She's a great storyteller. So she was talking with a lot of emphasis and a lot of projection. And I was kind of sitting there, feeling, was I okay? I don't know. And then she went in to cook lunch, and she said, well, come on in the house. Keep me company while I cook. So I went in the house. I was wearing my mask, but it was a small place. And I'm thinking, well, she's told me that she's not careful at all. What kind of a toxic broth am I sitting in here? So we went outside again. We ate. And when I was leaving, I began to unravel and thinking, wow, this is really a risk that I took. Wow, this was not smart. And I have allergies, so usually in the summer I have a postnasal drip and I have a little dry cough. And of course, the more I thought about it, the more exaggerated these symptoms began to be. And within 20 minutes, I was coming down with a lethal COVID case. And by the next morning, I was going through kind of insane lists like, well, if I die, I want to get the house ready. I want to take all the stuff out of the attic of the garage and put it so that people will know who it should go to. I want to make sure that my son will get my watch and my daughter will get this and will get that. And I caught myself, and I realized I was not in the world at all. I was completely in my own mind. And I just stopped and did one of those little one-breath practices where you just put all your attention on the edges of your nostrils as you're exhaling. And I came back into my own body. And I realized how out in the zone that I had been. And I think that's happening to a lot of people. I think a lot of couples who are not used to spending lots and lots of time together run into friction points and disagreements and sticky areas. People are stuck home with their kids. Their kids are genetically prepared to be transferring their loyalties from the nuclear family to their peers, and they're unable to do that. And so I'm hearing about a lot of meltdowns and a lot of difficulty. I'm reminded that if you look at statues from the Aztec and Mayan empires as they were breaking down, all the characters are filled with anxiety. The mouths are like this. There's rictus of tension. And there were supposedly great droughts that wrecked the corn crops of the Mayans, and that there were also, after Columbus landed, diseases began to spread through North America, even before pilgrims and all those people came. And Indian tribes were supposedly decimated. There's a book called 1491, which was what life might have been like before Columbus landed. And they think that one of the reasons that Cortez could sort of overcome the Inca was because the tribes were beginning to fracture and fall apart under the pressure of disease and pandemic, we can call it, and lack of crops and lack of wealth. So it won't be the first time that great civilizations and cultures have been stressed and collapsed. If you've ever been to Machu Picchu, or if you've ever been to the Pantheon, there are buildings there that I'm sure if you were living in those cultures, you would think could never crumble. What could be more permanent than the Twin Towers? But we know, don't we? We know how intangible and how transient everything is. And if we haven't really accepted that, and it's really hard to accept it when it comes to your own existence, and especially if you think of your existence as a fixed, solid thing that's separate from the rest of the universe, then you're always at peril. Then your attention is always fixed on winking out. So I go back again to this metaphor, my favorite metaphor, of a choppy ocean with lots of little wavelets, not big rollers. And I think each little wavelet is like a person. You can have a little timid wave, you can have a brave wave, you can have a wave saying, I'm the cutest wave in the ocean. And each wave could actually be a named thing in the universe. It could stand for a mountain range or a culture or a flower or a hummingbird or a species of animal. Whatever it is, a human life, it rises up into form for a while. And when it's in form, we say it's living. And when it falls back into the ocean, we say it's dead. But it's really a pretty vague demarcation. And the one thing that the waves forget, and I think we forget, is that we've never not been part of the ocean. And so again, you have to repeat it over and over. Buddha's understanding of the central delusion of mankind is the fact that we think that we are a fixed and separate entity, when in fact we're completely interdependent. Thich Nhat Hanh calls it interbeing with everything. That there's no sunlight, there's no us. If there's no water, there's no us. If there's no pollinating insects, there's no us. If there's no microbes in the soil, there's no us. If we poison the soil, there's no us. So the idea that we have a separate a separate existence, is an illusion. Yes, of course, we have a specific form for a while, and we have an awareness from that form, but that's only half the equation. And if we forget the other half, that we're also always the ocean, then we're really prone to anxiety. Because then we're this tiny little separate integer, completely naked and undefended against the enormity of the universe. Because we've forgotten that we are the enormity of the universe. We are the impossible heat of the sun. We are the coolness of the moon. We are the dew. We are the bird songs. And the reason we call it a practice is because it takes some concentration and some dedication to overcome this habit of thinking that we're just me. I'm just I, the person who's been told who I am by other people his entire existence, just like all of us. And then we begin to imply things about ourselves. And we do it long enough, we develop this idea that we have a fixed identity, almost like it's another organ. But there is no organ for the self. The self is just an awareness. And that in itself should be a great liberating comfort. Because there's nothing but our habits which are kind of restricting us and making us unhappy. Remember, I talked once about dukkha. And dukkha is exactly that kind of mental suffering that I was going through. Oh my God, I was careless. I'm going to die. Let me put my stuff out in the yard. It sounds crazy, but how much crazier than going into a bar in the midst of the pandemic because you can't stand yourself anymore. You can't stand your thoughts, and you just need a few yucks and a drink and don't want to see anybody in a mask. So this was completely predictable. And it's anxiety, I think, that's driving people both to wear masks and not wear masks. The people who are not wearing masks are anxious about being afraid. They're anxious about that the pandemic could be as real as the newspapers say it is. It's not bothering the president. Why should it bother me? So when we begin to identify with those mental movies, or when we begin to watch those mental movies and we stop realizing that we're out in the warmth of the sunlight, and in this present moment, we're fine. I mean, there's such a difference between this moment and emptiness. Remember, I read the Heart Sutra once. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no feeling, no perceptions, no impulses, no consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of eyes until no realm of mind consciousness, no ignorance and also no extinction of it, no suffering and also no extinction of it. Well, the ocean is emptiness. The ocean is total formlessness. Fundamentally, that's what we're made of, whether we're a projection of emptiness. I don't want to say that emptiness is the reality and form is not. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. And we can only understand emptiness or perceive it through the multiple varieties of its forms. If it had characteristics, there were things it couldn't be. But it's everything. So when we find ourselves feeling anxious, it's really good to have some kind of a touchstone, whether it's sitting zazen and just exploring it, finding out where in your body it is, finding out where the tension is, finding out what the specifics. Chico, are you anxious? Finding out what the specifics of your mental movies are, and reminding yourself, wait, I'm in my body. I'm breathing in this moment. In this moment, I don't think I'm sick. And even if I am sick, in this moment, I'm still here in this body. and everything this side of pulse and breath is gravy. I mean, if I was lying in a muddy ditch with my nose an inch above water and bullets flying over my head, I would still be glad to be alive. So I think we have to be careful when we listen to the news, when we listen to the anxiety of the broadcasters. They're uptight. I mean, part of their job is to amp up the drama so that they glue our eyeballs to the television, and then they can raise their advertising rates according to the numbers of people watching. But I don't think it's just cynical. I think they're actually freaked out. I watch a lot of news, usually about 20 minutes at a shot when I'm eating. And people are in despair. Nobody believed that the United States was so fragile that it could fall apart so rapidly, that so many of its institutions could be dissolved by an oaf, a warlord. And people are really frightened. They don't know if they can trust the election. They don't know if Trump will leave office. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if their jobs are going to come back. Their jobs are probably not going to come back. And they're also aware that the government is doing nothing to prepare them for whatever the new future is. No money is being spent on retraining workers. So not to inject politics, but I've actually had the thought or the insight that the pandemic is actually killing conservatism. Maybe not real intellectual conservatism, but the way it's understood colloquially by most people, by Ronald Reagan, who said, government's not the solution, it's the problem, and Grover Norquist, who wanted to make government small enough to drown it in a bathtub, and Newt Gingrich, who declared open war on the other party. And so since the time of Ronald Reagan, since the 70s, conservatives have been putting judges in courts and putting people in office that basically disrespected government and had an ideological stake in it not working. And now the pandemic has come, and we have no institution with which to fight it. The government has relinquished its authority to co-opt manufacturing, to make masks, to make swabs, to make reagents, to demand of the states that everyone wear masks. It's not a question of opinion. If I go outside and I see somebody who's not wearing a mask, I see somebody who is more concerned with their own comfort or image than my safety. And who's the referee? Well, normally government, if it's a fair broker, would be the referee. And we would be trusting it to bring the states in line, to organize the country and make our reaction to the pandemic consistent. 2,260,000 people have died to date. And the government is basically doing nothing. It's been left to the states. This is generating a lot of anxiety on every level. Republicans are now anxious that they're going to be out of office, and they're starting to wear masks. Democrats are wondering, what can they do? So what we can do is take care of ourselves and our states of mind and not transmit that anxiety. We can learn to sit every day. We can learn to dissolve into emptiness and disappear and calm down and be relaxed so that when danger comes, we're actually relaxed. We're actually ready to do something. We're not hysterical. And when people talk to us and they're frightened, we can see it. And our bodies will be telling their bodies, it's okay. It's okay, yeah, there's danger. Yep, there's plenty to be concerned about and vigilant about. But right in this instant, do we need to admit fear into it? Does that really help anybody? I'd say no. So we call this a practice. We call Buddhism a practice. We practice this over and over and over again. We have a lifetime of indulgence, of indulging in our thoughts, indulging in our emotions, indulging in our feelings, not really monitoring how we respond. We just trust what we think and feel and go with it. And now the stakes are really high, and one of the best gifts that we can give to others is by showing them, modeling a way to behave in dangerous, anxious times. So I'm going to look and see if I've gotten any questions here. It says, one of my dear ones informed me that people are sneaking being not careful. All human behaviors are here at all at once, as usual, in world crisis times, which are in all times. Plagues are ever with us. Good to think and feel and be aware and do love as a verb all at once. And it's both possible and not possible. Yes? Yeah, it's possible and not possible. It's possible to fix your intention on being kind and being loving and being straightforward and being helpful, and you'll fumble. You'll make mistakes. Oh, look, messages are coming back. Someone asked me, are you describing Buddha nature, and does Chico have it too? You know, that's a very famous koan of a student who asked his teacher, does a dog have Buddha nature? And the teacher, Joshu, answered by going, moo. And moo is the Japanese term for no. But the student knows that the dog has Buddha nature. And Joshu knows the student knows that. So what is he showing him? He's showing him a way to be with that answer. So yes, everything is Buddha nature. Power came back on. Keep going. Okay, more questions? I'm just going to look and see. Am I describing Buddha nature? Okay, I'm just going to keep going a little bit in case there are some more questions. Kay Hayward, how are you? So I'm happy to take any questions about anxiety or to hear if you thought this was useful, straightforward enough, helpful. Because if it's not helpful, you shouldn't listen to me. But for myself anyway, as someone who was once really ridden with anxiety, I mean, I carried a pistol during the 60s. Peace, love, good vibes, and 6 in the small of my back. I can't think of a better technology and a better practice than meditation. And meditating on emptiness as an antidote to anxiety, and reminding yourself to bring yourself out of your mental movies, out of your attachments to your own narratives and drama and attachments to those fantastically interesting stories, and just come into the reality of your body and the reality of what's around and the people you're with. I'm just looking here for questions. Buddha means. Buddha is your own innate wisdom. Buddha nature is emptiness. You have it. You're composed of it. When we bow to Buddha, we're bowing to wisdom. And wisdom is the understanding that reality is both and. It's both singular and plural. They don't contradict each other. I'm here and I'm also all of it. Both and simultaneously. That's the Buddha. You're the Buddha. This is why we say put no head above your own. Everything you need is coming over your spinal telephone. If you can be disciplined enough and calm enough and quiet yourself enough to hear the soft way that it communicates to you. That's Buddha. You don't need me. Love the discussion on anxiety. Is there a way to gently tell a sibling that their negativity does no one good, especially when nightly calls have become a habit? So that's a really good question. So a sibling calls you and they're frightened and they're upset about something and they call and talk to you. Well, so I've had cases where I've had to recognize that meditation doesn't solve everything. I'm a big believer in therapy for certain problems. And sometimes you have to say to somebody, you know, I can't help you. I would like to help you. I can't help you. I'm not doing you any good. You really need to get some therapy. And if that person keeps calling back and hasn't taken those steps, I think you have a right to get a good night's sleep, or you have a right to live anxiety-free. Because some people sort of discharge pressure by talking out their problems. But they're asking you to be a sounding board. They're asking you to be the one that listens. And I think after you've made all good efforts to be helpful, you have to confess that I can't help you. And I find these kind of discussions too disturbing. I think you need professional help for this, and I'm not a professional. So call me, talk about anything. I love you, but I can't talk about this. I've had to do that in cases, and it's not always appreciated, but it works for me. Ken Newman, playing music has been the greatest help to me to deal with my own anxiety. It's great, but it's tough to play music while you're doing shopping. So you might want to have something that's a little smaller and a little more internal than a guitar that you can turn to when stuff comes up. I play guitar every day, but they're big to carry around. A student who had to perform on stage suffered from stage fright. He asked his teacher, "How do I stop the fear?" The teacher replied, "How does a tree stop the wind?" That was a great teacher. Okay? So because I used to teach stopping stage fright, I've thought about this a lot. I think the teacher's response, "How does a tree stop the wind?" is the best response, because it doesn't. And when you're an empty pipe, you just let the fear blow through you. And at a certain point when you face it, you realize that fear can't stop you. And then it just kind of withers away. But I did borrow a technique once from these guys, Bandler and Grindler, neuro-linguistic programming, that actually works. And I've taught a lot of people to conquer stage fright. And I'll just tell you, because it's a quick exercise. You imagine that you're standing on a stage in an auditorium in front of lots and lots of people, and you're starting to be overcome with stage fright. I guarantee you, in your mind's eye, there is someone in that audience in the first couple of rows that you're afraid of. So you should look and you should find that person. Might be an aunt, might be a mother, a father, a brother, an uncle, a teacher, somebody that frightened you whose judgments you're really afraid of. So you want to find that person. Then you want to notice their age. And whatever age they're at, you want to ask yourself, what age was I when they were that age? And usually it comes out that it's somewhere between 6 and 11 and 12. You were that age. that that person is frozen in the mind's eye at the age they were at when they inflicted a judgment on you. So then what you do is you fast forward them up to the present age. And you look at them and you see if you're still affected by them. If you are, move them into the back row. See if you're still affected by them. If you are, change the picture to black and white. See if you're still affected by them. If you are, send them out into the lobby. There's no need to carry this person around with you. That's kind of a psychological approach. Nick Murray's example is the Zen approach. The tree and the wind are not mutually exclusive. They're not in combat. You and fear is just like a wind blowing through you. Soldiers are afraid, but they have to do what they have to do. First responders are afraid, but they do what they have to do. How are we doing here? I'll see if we got a few more questions. I have a friend who is a doctor at a Sonoma hospital and is sad and stressed over his COVID and other patients. What can I say to ease his pain? Well, his pain is coming from empathy. I mean, he sounds like a great person. But if his empathy leads him to not take care of himself, he's not helping his patients. So I would suggest he practice meditating every day. It's going to make him feel better. It's going to make him more open to the rising and falling of lives and deaths and births. And there's not much he can do except take care of one patient at a time and not hold on to the result. He can just do his best. And that's all he can do. And to identify with the defeats and the failures will actually make him less effective at helping other people. So, and I would give him cookies. I'm a big believer in cookies. Everything goes better with cookies. Let me see if there's more questions. Here's somebody who said, folks comment on my exuding a good attitude. Well, good. That's special. Oh, here's a good one. How to deal with beloved that are into the conspiracy theories and won't wear masks. I have a really good friend who, I can barely talk to on any common political problem because he refuses to accept anything that comes from the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. I mean, professional journalists who yes, they may have an establishment bent, but they're also in competition with one another, and there are standards, and if they break the standards, they're called out for them. So I guess the first thing I would do is I would just not fall into the weeds of the conspiracy theories and just say, I don't want to talk about that. And then I would set some boundary about if you're not wearing a mask, you're not coming into my house. I mean, I have a woman friend who's moved out of her house until her husband and daughter took COVID seriously and began cleaning up and washing the surfaces in their hands and wearing masks. This is your life, and your affection for somebody should not give them the right to put you at risk, especially serious risk. So how beloved is that person if they're threatening your life? So I know it's difficult to set boundaries sometimes. I don't like to say no. But if you don't, then you're just a leaf blown before the wind. You've given away your center of gravity. So I would take that one on. The cookies for the doctor. Yes, the cookies for the doctor. Cookies. Let's see if there's any others. So here's somebody saying, I'm not sure what the question is, so I'll relate an experience. My first introduction, he wrote, to mediation, he meant meditation, was in a 10-day Vipassana retreat. I was young and about to lose myself in addiction. In hindsight, I realized I used the ideas of everything is changing, there's only now, and the like as a strategy to not be present, to hide, tricky mind. Does this bring up anything for you that you feel like sharing? Well, there's a guy named John Wellwood who worked out a field of psychology that posited kind of an internal family system, that we didn't have just an ego, an id, and a superego, that we had lots and lots of people in there, and we needed to name them, identify them, and bring them to the surface. And he had a term, which I'm forgetting at this moment, but the term described people who are trying to be too enlightened to admit their feelings. So you're having an argument with someone, and this person is being deliberately unemotional and insisting that they're not angry or insisting that they're not feeling anything because they're too enlightened. Something bypass. Anyway, there are all sorts of tricks. I don't know how you did that. Everything is changing. There's only now. I don't know what you hid behind. It's hard for me to know. I was an addict for a long time. I just hid behind heroin, which was very good at blocking out everything. Thoughts slowed down to like a bubble coming through molasses. I could handle them. So I just can't exactly answer your question, because everything is changing to me is remembering that flowers and people and things are dying as we watch them. They're unrepeatable experiences, and their passing and changing makes them precious. So if you didn't know that you were changing, if you thought that you were still and you were some fixed thing hiding behind an idea, I don't know, how successful was that? But you seem like you're a different person now, so obviously whatever you did didn't work. Anyway, I'm sorry I can't be more helpful because I don't get the dynamic. Okay to meditate multiple times a day? I think so. I think certainly twice a day is great. And if you want to take a day, once a week or once a month, and sit a period, and then walk very slowly, taking a slight sliding step at each breath, moving your foot forward on an inhale, and then shifting your weight on the exhale. Walk for 5 or 10 minutes, and then sit again, and then do that 3 or 4 periods, and then maybe take a cup of tea, maybe do that 3 or 4 more times. If you sit 5 or 6 periods in a day, you'll be surprised. You'll be in a very, very different place. And I try to sit long periods at least once a year. I think it's good. Let's see what else. I'm not getting anything from... Oh, Rona Weintraub just saw that Kay Hayward said hello. Okay. I don't see too many more questions. It's 10:50. I don't want to just burn you out. I'm just going to double check. Yeah. I'm not an anxious person. Friend of the doctor. may have, I may have, I may have worked up people coming up with other ideas. Ruby Lee says, stage fright. I was taught to consider every person in the audience as a good friend. If it works, there's no right way. We say put no head above your own. So if somebody has something that works, please do it. Someone else is suggesting humming to yourself, simple low tones for self-soothing. Well, you can't do that in the Zendo because that intrudes on other people's silence. But you can certainly do it a lot. At the beginning of the pandemic, the wealthy retail organization I worked for was not doing enough quickly enough for my comfort. We were lagging behind even small businesses. We're in a high exposure area. I've got these stupid faces now blocking my thing. And I was afraid for myself and coworkers. I could go home and care for myself. Refused to work, but I wanted to speak for them as well. So I wrote to the management of the company, explaining my concerns, asking what was their plan to help us. I suffered some uncomfortable conversations with that. That's like stage fright. I suffered some uncomfortable conversations with that, but was glad that I did it. I'm always conflicted about the balance between looking after myself and being socially responsible and acting externally. Do you have any thoughts on that? Yeah, my thoughts are that you should teach that, because that is the balance. That if you forget both halves of it, you become an ideologue, or you become so convinced of your own reality that you stop taking in the environment and the concerns of other people. There's a great term in Buddhism called upaya. And upaya signifies skillful means. And skillful means is it's not enough to be enlightened. It's not enough to see the solution for a problem. You have to explain the solution in a way that the person in front of you will hear. And no one size fits all. So I think it's always good to be checking back and forth. What am I feeling? What does that person in front of me seem to be feeling? How can I close this gap? How can I find a way? Because when everything's changing, it's like trying to cross a body of water by stepping on floating logs. Everything's moving. And to me, the model is to watch a fox cross a clearing. If my dogs go out, my dogs get fed every day. They have energy to burn. I live in a place they don't have to be on a leash, and they're just running around and nosing down. They can chase every squirrel. They can chase every cat because they have energy to burn. But if you watch a fox, it's as delicate as a hare. I mean, it walks, it stops, it looks, it sniffs. It's always checking between the environment and its own hunger, the environment and its own wants and needs. And I think that particularly as Americans who've been told how special we are and been overfed to the point of obesity and privilege and all of that stuff, that kind of hesitancy and delicacy is well worth emulating, to really plug in more fully to the environment and the other people that we're with, soften our own agenda, receive other people's agendas. We don't have to commit to action until we have a direct communication from our intuition. Jeannie, my dog is dying of cancer. You once said aim beyond birth and death. How do you do that? Well, you know how to do that. It's terrible to have a dog die, or a cat, or a pet. It's heart-wrenching. But you still have to take care of them, even while you're grieving that you're not going to see them anymore. You have to look to their comfort. And The dog is ungraspable. The dog is emptiness. You are emptiness. Even while you're you and while it's a dog. And grief is the admission price for love, for attachment. Because it's always going to include loss. And loss is stage fright. Stage fright is loss of self-confidence. Stage fright is loss in the belief that you're worthy. Stage fright is loss of your dog. Stage fright is loss of your comfort. Breathe with the dog. Sit zazen with the dog. Match your breathing to the dog. Love it, that's all you can do. It's out of your hands. If you're asking me how you cannot grieve, you have to grieve. But you can burn grief up like ash. I know you know this. You can burn it totally. I once wept for an entire session, 7 days on my pillow. Sniveling and weeping. The monks were sitting like oil paintings on either side, and I was just bereft. Well, once it's burned up, it's burned up. And I'm sorry that you're losing your dog. I really am, Jeannie. I worry about that with my dogs. I carry a card in my wallet attached to my driver's license saying, I have dogs at home. If something happens to me, please call so-and-so. Did a message come through? Yeah, I overrise in money. Let's see what time it is. It's 10:58. I'll go to just a couple more minutes. Let me see if there's anything else. You mentioned one breath meditation. How can we do something physical to contain anxiety? And what suggestions do you have? Well, what makes you think that anxiety can be contained? And what would you think the container is? If your container is closer to a colander than a pot, just let the anxiety leak out. And you leak it out by shifting your attention. Put your attention on something else. You're snagged by a mental movie. So the one breath meditation is a way of, one breath exhale is like a way of shifting and capturing your concentration again. You develop tricks. But if you sit in zazen and you put part of your awareness on your posture and your breathing and your mudra, and you trust that solidity of that posture, you can just let the anxiety go and burn itself out. You can't keep a good mood. The only reason you keep the anxiety is because you fight it and it gets stronger. You're feeling something you don't want to feel. If you accept that that's what you're feeling and begin investigating it, it'll change while you're watching it. You won't be able to hold on to it. So I would not think about containing. I would think about Nick's example of the wind blowing through a tree. Anxiety in the middle of the night, awakening with a fear response. Well, that may be a healthy thing, you know. They say that one of the things that dreams do are resolve important issues for us that we didn't have time to address in daylight. And it may be that when we sleep and dream and we have anxiety dreams and stuff like that, it's just the mind shaking off anxiety like my dogs shake when they stand up. They shake off tension. I don't think it's necessarily a sign of anything wrong, Terry. I think I think your body's taking care of itself and your mind is taking care of itself. And you maybe didn't notice the thing that made you fearful in the daytime. The psychiatrist once told me that it's always this morning in the unconscious. It has no sense of time. And he urged me to talk to it. And I found that to be really useful. You talk to that part of yourself and you explain, when we were kids, I didn't have the power and I didn't have the skills to take care of you. But now I do. You can relax. Honestly, I've got this. Thanks for watching out for me. I mean, it sounds loopy, but this is John Wellwood's Internal Family Systems too. And it actually has a lot of, you recognize, you name Nasty Nancy and Simpering Sam and all these little voices, and you invite them to the table and you give them all their say. It kind of comforts the part of us that's, unconscious. What is the unconscious? It's things that are too important to forget. And we lock them in our body. And one of the things that happens when you sit a lot of Zazen is a ligament breaks loose and softens, and you're flooded with stuff that was locked in that ligament. And then it's gone. Let's see, a couple more. Thank you. Too new to clear a question. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. My daughter is a PhD therapist, and it's her belief that cognitive behavioral therapy and digital behavioral therapy are the two most effective therapies around right now. They have workbooks, they're short form, they're not long-term psychoanalysis, and she's a great believer for them, especially for anxiety. So this woman's saying, though I can't sit and listen intently throughout your teachings, I find that to hear your voice in the background, it's comforting. I feel your honest caring for us as fellow human beings. Thanks. Well, thank you. Maybe what I'm saying is not so interesting to you, but if the sound of my voice is comforting, thanks. I'm fulfilling my intention to be helpful.